Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of a Little Marketing Podcast. So, as we continue in this series to create a positioning and point of difference, today we're going to go through step 7 in that process. So, step 7 is the second last step in this process. So, I'm hoping so far you've gotten heaps out of the first 6 steps. Feel free to write a comment about which step you think gave you the most inspiration or gave you the most help to create that positioning and point of difference and get you to be able to cut through the clutter world that we live in 2025. So let's get into step 7. So step 7 is about really creating that positioning. So that we've gone through those 6 steps. So step 7 is a bit of a culmination of that, and really to define and be really clear about what our positioning and point of difference is. And then the final step, which will be step 8 next week, is about putting that positioning and that point of difference into a simple statement or key message that you can then use across all of your marketing touch points. So as we've done in this series, I've referred to our book, Small Business Marketing Decluttered, because it goes through the exact same steps that we're going through in this podcast. So let's get into step 7. So as I've mentioned through this series and all of our videos and podcasts, positioning is all about positioning your business and your brand in the minds of your customers that is different to the competition. We live in such an over-communicated and cluttered world, so you need to find a really simple way to cut through that clutter and position yourself in the minds of your customers that is different to the competition, or where you're eliminating some of the competition. So the first 6 steps, I should say, have allowed us to get to that point. Now, what are some of the things that we've gone through in the first 6 steps to get you to think about that point of difference? So I'm going to talk you through some of those in a bit kind of high level today before we get into the detail. So if you haven't already asked yourself this question in the first 6 steps, I want you to ask yourself these 10 questions. So it's about thinking about the service or product that you provide, and is that any different? What do you do better than your competitors? Can you really focus on something that you genuinely in your heart know that you do better? Not just the service we provide is better, but the actual offering that you provide is better. Who is your audience? Are you really focusing on a type of audience? And be really specific on that. I don't mean just gender, but I mean by maybe the occupation that they're in, or the business that they run, or what influences them. So thinking about that type of target audience that you want to focus on. Where do you provide the offering? Is it via a region? Is it a city? Is it a suburb? Is it Australia wide? And are you being really super explicit around that? Overall, what makes you different to the competition? If you were to ask 5 of your customers, what would they say that makes you different? And to also ask your clients, like, why do they keep coming back to you? Why do they remain loyal to your product or your service offering? And if you ask clients why they chose you in the first place, that's a really important motivation. I did a short last week about the buying journey that people go through when they're buying. So have you considered what that buying journey looks like for your customers and clients? What credibility are you giving your business? So have you got reviews? Are you asking testimonials? Are you doing a podcast? Like, what credibility and social proof are you providing for your business to give your customers and clients some reassurance that they should choose you? How can you position yourself as an expert in what you do, as a leader in your field, so that people, again, trust you and believe in what you do, and you've got the runs on the board to show them that. And I'm going to read this one out, can your point of difference and how you position yourself in the minds of your customers and clients, different to the competition, be based on your product or service offering, your target audience, your location, and even a combination of all 3? And another one to think about is how you're positioning yourself as an expert and how you communicate that as well. Remember, marketing is a battle of the mind, so you need to be able to cut through in a really clear and concise way and be really obvious to people about what you do and why you're different. So let's talk about category here for a minute. So what is category? What category is your product or service offering? Can you define it in a really clear and simple way? So if I'm going to use some brands that kind of everyone knows of. So if we think of, traditionally Google, when they first started, they were in the search engine category. For Rolex, they're in the premium watch category. They're not just in the watch category, but the premium watch category. Or if I think of Red Bull, they're not just in the soft drink category, but they're specifically in the energy drink category. So what specific category is your business in? Now, when we go through, 4-hour planning meeting with our clients, this is the hardest part of that session. So I want you to take some time to think about what specific category you're in. Now, I just gave you 3 examples of kind of blue chip corporate clients. Now, obviously we work with small businesses, so I'm going to give you 5 examples of what a category looks like for a small business owner. So, for example, I've got them written down in front of me. So for example, you might be providing IT support for small businesses. That's a category. You're very, very specific about what you do. You might be a wedding florist. So you're not just a generic florist, but you're a wedding florist. You might be in residential drafting. So again, very specific about who you do the drafting for. You might provide a body scrub product to people. So that's the category that you're in, body scrub. Or you might be a photographer within sporting organisations. So again, really specific around what you do. So you're not just a generic photographer. So you can see with all those examples. So in all those, you could have been very generic. So IT could be 1,000 different things, but you could be IT support for a small business. So narrowing that focus and really focus. You're not just a florist, but you're a wedding florist. You're not just a drafting company, but you focus on drafting. And there's ways to even to have these even more focused, and we're going to get to that in the next step. Body scrub, so you might be body scrub specifically for newborn mums, for example, or the sporting organisation photographer. So you're not just a generic photographer; they're a dime a dozen, but really focusing on sporting clubs, or maybe even focusing on a particular sport and be the expert in that as well. So that's category. So by working through those first 6 steps would have allowed you to define the category that you're in and be really specific around that. So your category isn't just generic. You're not just a florist. You're not just in IT. You're not just a photographer. You're really, really specific, and your category is nice and focused. Now, you've probably heard me say this again, but when we work with small business clients, they say, well, I don't want to focus in a category because I want to, communicate and market everybody. The problem with that is that your message is diluted, and then you become like everybody else and you're competing with everyone else. Remember, positioning is about positioning your business and your brand in the minds of your customers that is different to the competition, where you're eliminating some of the competition. So that's the whole point of this whole process, and really focusing in on. So let's pretend that you want to focus on everyone. What does that message look like? What does the imagery look like? So let's use a wedding florist as an example. So if you just say I'm a florist, you're competing with all the florist shops down the road. You're competing with florists online. You're competing with wedding florists, christening florists. Like, you're competing with all the industry of florists. But if you just say we're a wedding florist, and all the imagery that you show on your social media, on your website, is all focused on the what a wedding looks like, what the flowers look like at a wedding. So when someone who is looking for flowers for their wedding, if they go to 2 websites, one is a generic florist and one is really targeted and shows like the picture of a wedding, we know who they're going to choose. And you as a consumer, you know who you will choose as well. And if they're expert in what you're looking for, and that there's a needs match. So really being really focused in on that category and what you do is so important. You don't want to be competing with the generic florist. You want to be really focusing on your audience and what you do well. So have a think about what category is your business in, and by really defining that category, it allows us to then really be specific around what our positioning will be and how we're positioning ourselves in the minds of our customers. So again, we spoke about what are the elements to create that positioning and be different. So based on your product or service offering, the location that you provide, and your target audience. So now let's create let's now give you some examples of, so I showed you really specific categories. Now I'm going to kind of just expand those categories a little bit more to consider the audience, the location, and the service offering all in one kind of summary. So let's look, I'm just going to refer to the book here. So positioning example 1 that we've got in our book, you are an Australian IT support company that focuses on small business. So again, really focus on where you do it, Australia, who you do it for, small businesses, and what you do, IT support. Position example 2. So you are a florist, service offering that focuses in on weddings in Sydney. So weddings is your audience, who you do it for, and Sydney obviously is the location. Position example 3. So you're a drafting company. So we mentioned that already. Drafting company that focuses on residential property. So there's so drafting, you're offering residential property, your audience, and regional cities, your location. So we've got the location in there as well. Perfect. I love the regional city example. Example 4. So you sell coffee body scrubs. So that's the offering, and you sell it to new mums, and you sell it globally because you do it online. So again, really clear about who you do, what you do, and who you do it for, and where you do it. And then 5, the photographer that focuses on sporting clubs in Melbourne. So again, photography, what they do in Melbourne, where they do it, and sporting clubs, who they do it for. So really being clear, and it's making sure that you are explicit around that positioning, and over again emphasize that positioning. So I talk about 4 key elements that make marketing great and make marketing successful. So it's 1, defining that positioning, which we're just about done. 2, never wavering from that and being really focused on what you do well and being the expert in that. 3, communicating that frequently and as often as humanly possible. And 4, communicating more than your competitors. Because logic tells us if you are communicating that clear message and that clear positioning more than your competitors, then logic tells us that you've got a high chance of customers or clients finding you over the competition, especially if your message is really clear. Imagine your competitor's message is vague and unclear and try to communicate to everyone. You're going to beat them every single time, I guarantee you. So that was step 7 in creating a positioning and point of difference to help you to cut through and clutter. I hope those examples really resonated from you. I want you to sit down. I want you to consider those 10 questions that I asked you at the beginning of this episode. I want you to consider what category you're in. I want you to really define it based on the first 6 steps that you've listened to. And by the end of that, you should be able to then really kind of put into a summary. And if it's a long sentence, that's fine. Put into a summary around what you do, who you do it for, and where you do it. And then next week is the final step, in steps 8, where we really look at how we make that summary of that category and what you do into a statement and a key message. Ideally, we want that message to be kind of between 3 and 7 words. That message that you can then use across all of your marketing touch points, whether it's your social, whether it's your AdWords, whether it's your website, whether it's your brochures, whatever marketing you're going to decide to do. That message is always the same and always consistent. So I hope you got a lot. Again, if you, after today's episode, let me know kind of which part of today you feel like you got the most out of. As always, I'd love for you to rate and review on our Spotify and Apple podcasts, as well as YouTube. Leave some comments. Let us know how we're going, anything else you'd like to hear, and where you feel like you got the most out of today. So looking forward to next week, step 8 in the point of difference and positioning step-by-step process to help you to cut through in 2025. Thanks, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Please note that all the information provided on this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to be specific advice to your individual situation. Please be sure to engage a professional for a customized approach to your business and personal circumstances.